Hello everybody and welcome back to another My Porch Prints tutorials. This is Kyra and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this shabby little junk journal. Specifically, we're going to be making the base and the pages for it. The actual decorating tutorial is going to be coming out next week, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on that. But today, just the base, just the pages, and I'm also going to be showing you some techniques for how to add pages into a junk journal that you've already put together or already finished or are currently working on. We get a lot of people who want to know that, so that's kind of what this video is going to focus on, and then decorating will come next week. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. To begin, I'm going to be taking some of these antique book covers. Now this is from a kit in our shop, as well as a kit called Pretty Spines that go with it. So I will have that linked down in the description box for anyone interested, and you can just kind of take a look at them and find a couple that, you know, look nice together and match the project you're working on. You can sort of find whatever looks good together. For mine, I am going to be using this 2-inch spine here, but of course you can use whichever size works best with your project. And I'm also going to grab this front and back cover that had these kind of like pink roses on it. I just thought it looked nice with the papers I'm going to be using today, which are from our Shabby Botanist kit. So I will have all of the links to everything down in the description box, including links to these pieces of chipboard, which are 5.5 by 8.5 inches. And these can be found in our Amazon influencer shop if you are interested. However, if you don't want that, you can also just use like a cereal box and just cut the pieces out yourself. It's a little bit thinner and a little bit more pliable, which is why I'm going to be using it for my spine, because I'm going to want to like curve my spine in our decorating video, and this will just make that a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out a matching piece for my spine. And now I have all of my base pieces. I'm going to grab this template. This comes with the Pretty Spine kit, so make sure that you find the proper template for your spine. Since I'm using the 2-inch spine, I'm using the 2-inch template. Alright, so now that we have all of our pieces, I'm going to move aside sort of the paper like cover piece and just glue up my chipboard pieces down to my 2-inch template. So just something to note, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can just use the cover and spines as is and glue those straight down to this if you want to, but I wanted a little bit more like stability. I wanted it to be a little bit tougher and stand up to all the decorating I'm going to be doing, so that's what I'm doing today. Alright, so I'm just going to begin by gluing my spine down first and try to keep that centered in the, template here. And then I'm going to glue down my front and back covers to the little wings here. And it's important to remember that when you're gluing these pieces down, you don't want to accidentally glue your spine and your cover pieces together. So you'll want to give it a little bit of a bend while it's drying. Otherwise, they'll end up being stuck together and won't fold into like, the proper book shape. So just keep that in mind as you work here. And we're just going to do the same thing with the back cover. Again, make sure to fold it every once in a while as it dries. And this should be sort of our final, base, like the bones of our junk journal here. And I'm going to be covering up this template on the inside because I don't want to accidentally see it between my signatures. So I'm just going to take one of the pretty papers from the Shabby Botanist kit, and I'm just going to kind of measure out a piece that's large enough to cover that template here. And I accidentally mismeasured and cut mine a little bit too short. And does this bother me? Yes, it does. Is there anything I can do about it? Probably, but I'm not going to do it now. So just make sure that when you're measuring things, you take a little more time than me. And when it comes to covering up the inside covers, I wanted to try using some of the antique book covers. However, I feel like it just doesn't read as inside covers. So instead I'm gonna cover those up with a pretty paper cut a little bit smaller. So I kind of liked how the gold on the edge kind of created like a frame. So I decided to just keep that and then glue some pretty papers on top, and hoped that that would make it look a little bit more like the inside of an antique book and make it a little less confusing as to what was the inside and what was the outside. And I think that this actually looked a lot better and made a little more sense. So we're going to go ahead with that and then roll back the clock in time and decorate the front cover here. So for this, again, I'm going to be covering up sort of where the spine and the covers meet and make it a little bit smoother using just this coffee dyed paper that I had on hand. And I'm also going to go over the edges with some distress ink, and this is the color Ground Espresso, and this is just to sort of help, again, the covers and the spine blend together a little bit more. So I'm going to take that same color of distress ink and also go over all of the edges of my covers and spines, and that's just going to kind of create the illusion that it's all one piece. So now I'm going to go ahead and glue the things down. So just taking my spine first, gluing that, and then the covers. And it's okay if your covers are a little bit smaller than your actual like chipboard or something. This is why we're kind of covering up the seams with distress ink and stuff like that. However, if you really hate the way that looks, you could use a wider spine and put that kind of underneath your covers, and that'll give you a more seamless flow between covers and spine and just kind of make the illusion a little more complete. Alright, so now that the base is done, we can go ahead and move on to our signatures, and signatures just means a collection of papers that you bind into your journal. And for my usual signatures, I would just put all of these papers together and bind them in all at once. But for today's tutorial, I want to show you how you can add papers in after you've already bound papers into your journal previously. So for that, I have some of these papers. These are from our Shabby Botanist papers kit, and there's 8 of them here, and they're only printed on one side, and I'm going to show you later how you can add these into your journal once it's already bound. So I'm going to put these aside for now. And the actual papers we're going to be binding into our journal are some of these coffee dyed papers and some of these blank and lined papers. Now, it is important that whatever papers you're binding into your journal at this stage are printed front and back, and that you can use any papers you want. These lined ones I accidentally printed vertically instead of horizontally, but we're going to just use them anyway. And I do have another 9 pages here, and I'm dividing them into 3 signatures with 3 sets of papers per signature here. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, well, that's on purpose, because we're gonna, again, be adding papers in later, so I didn't want to fill it up too full to begin with. Alright, and for our template to help with binding here, I'm just taking a piece of blank cardstock, and I'm going to measure out my spine, which is 8.5 by 2 inches, and I'm just going to cut that again from this piece of cardstock. And for kind of marking where I want to poke my holes through the spine, I'm going to kind of find some sections where I do or do not want my holes to be. I decided I'm going to put mine at the top and bottom, so I want to make sure that they are centered within these panels. So I'm going to kind of mark off where the bottom of these panels are, like this. It's going to give me nice even portions here. And then to find the center, I'm just going to fold this top portion here down to those marks that I made, like this. And that's going to give me the exact center of that panel. All right. So go ahead and do that on both sides, just like this. And I'm going to take a pencil and mark these lines here where these creases are, just to make them a little more visible for everyone. And then I'm going to find the center of that line. So since this is 2 inches, 1 inch right here is going to be the center. Yours might be a little different depending on the size of your spine. And I'm going to mark the center off on both the top and bottom line, again, just like this, making a little dot here. And it's really important to try to keep everything as even as possible. Otherwise your little dots you make are going to be uneven and wonky. So then I'm going to measure a 1/4 inch in from either side, and again make another dot. And this is just to I didn't want my dots too close together or too far apart. I'm just trying to keep things sort of nicely spaced. You can move yours in a little closer or out a little further depending on what you want to do. I don't want them too close to the edge of my spine Otherwise they might like cause the spine and the cover to like tear, you know, if you put holes in the crease. So that's kind of why I moved them inward a little bit. All right, so now you can clearly see I've got all 3 signature holes marked, and I'm going to clamp this down onto my spine so that it doesn't move while I'm making the holes in my spine. So some bulldog clips or some paper clips can really help with that. And make sure that you get this as even as you can, line it up on your spine really carefully, and then it's time to make holes. So I'm going to be using a crocodile for this. Again, this is linked in our Amazon shop if you're interested. And I'm using the 1/8 inch punch. However, you could also use like an awl or some kind of needle to make the holes. It's kind of up to you. The crocodile just makes things really quick and easy and goes through the chipboard really simply. So. Alright, so now you can see I've got all of my holes punched here, so we are ready to work on the actual signatures. So I've got my 3 signatures here like this with the 3 pages in each of them, and I'm going to begin with my first one by folding it in half. So try to get all of your papers aligned here, and then just fold the entire thing in half like this. Give it a good crease, and you're going to want to save that template, like the spine template we just made, because we're going to be using it here to mark off where we're punching our holes in our signature. So go ahead and fold that template in half along that center line, just like this. And then we're going to place this inside of our folded signature, just kind of matching up the crease with one another like this. And again, we're going to clip this down so that it doesn't move while we punch out this center hole right on the crease of our signature. So again, using that 1/8 punch, just going to go in like this. Be careful not to accidentally clip your bulldog clip here. You might have to move them around a little bit. Top and bottom, just punch them out like that. And keep your clips on your paper because you don't want your paper to shuffle around. We want to keep them as still as possible. Remove your template, and then I'm going to be using something called the brad binding method, where I am finding some of these brads. You can get them at various stores or on Amazon. You can find them in different shapes and sizes. I'm going with these really little ones. Again, these are linked in our Amazon shop if you are interested. And we're going to just thread these brads through the spine and then also through the hole in our signature that we just made like this. And then go ahead and flatten out those prongs. You want to make sure that you flatten them out vertically and not horizontally, otherwise you won't be able to close your pages. And then I'm going to remove my clips, and it helps sometimes to give the pages like a crease here, since they want to be kind of lying flat because of these little brad prongs. So go ahead and flatten things out like this. And now the brad binding method is really nice because we talked about earlier how you might want to add more pages to your journal. And this is a really simple way to do that because all you have to do is sort of pull the little brads out and then add any more extra pages you want to, and then put the brads back in. And they're really solid and they hold really well. The only thing to keep in mind is if you have a lot of pages, you might need to use a longer brad. So just keep that in mind if you're making like a really thick journal. But otherwise, you can just go ahead and continue with the process for each of your signatures, create your holes, add the brads, and when you're done, it should look something like this. You've got the little brad heads on the outside spine, and then all of your pages are secured into your journal. Right, and it's a really easy no-sew method for your journal. However, sometimes the little brad prongs like to move around, so you can add a little bit of glue and like let it dry so that they kind of stay in place. Or if you don't like the way they look or you want to hold them in place, again, you could use something like a ribbon or like a sticker or another page to kind of cover up this part of the sort of crease in your signature, and that'll just kind of hide those brads. However, if you do that, then you won't be able to squeeze the prongs shut and pull the brads out and add more pages in. So that is just something to keep in mind with this method. If you want to be able to pull them out, then you need to be able to have access to the little prongs. And if you are considering adding more pages in, you'll want to hold on to that template that you made earlier so you can punch the holes in any pieces of paper you want to add to your journal, and then you just kind of do the same process as before. Now, another method for being able to add more papers into your journal is something called the tie-in method, which I used in this journal here. Again, I will have a link to this junk journal down in the description box if you're interested in seeing how I did that. But it's a really simple method to just untie one of your tie-ins and then add more pages that way. But let's say you've like sewn your pages in, or you've done something really permanent, or you just don't feel like taking your decorative pages out. Is there a way to add more papers? Yes, there is. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So taking some of those papers I mentioned earlier, I'm going to kind of show you what to do here. So I'm going to start with 4 in these signatures. I'm going to do kind of like 2 signatures of 4 pages each. And starting with my first 4, we're going to just fold everything in half. So take each page one by one and fold them in half, and make sure if any of your artwork is directional that you have it, you know, facing the right way up while you're working. Otherwise you might accidentally attach a paper into your journal upside down. So keep that in mind here. And how this is going to go is we are going to take the first 2 pages like this back to back, and we're going to just glue these sort of center pages together like this. All right. And when you are doing that, something you can try if you want to is to only add glue to the top and bottom and leave kind of like one side open so that you can tuck ephemera sort of into this sort of secret tuck spot between pages of your journal if you want to. Just kind of an extra fun thing you can try. I'm going to save myself the extra thought and time today and just glue everything down shut to one another. Just make it a little bit easier. And we're just going to glue these little pages one on top of the other back to back like this. And while doing this, try your best to keep the spine even. So you don't want one of your pages like too high or too low or too far in or too far back. Try to keep everything nice and even. That'll save you some trouble later. And we're just going to repeat that process with our next page here. So flip through, fold it over, and then grab your next page. And same thing, we're going to glue them back to back like this and continue doing that process with as many pages as you want to add to your journal. It's kind of just up to you. I'm just going to start with 4 here today. All right, and once you've got those all glued together, you should be able to flip through each of them and see kind of how this is sort of starting to work here. And if you didn't get things perfectly even, you might have some white on the edge. You can always cut that off or go over the pages, like the edges, with some distress ink to hide that, sort of just kind of up to you and how much you care. And then, now that we have this signature, we're going to add it into our journal. So go ahead and find a space between 2 of your signatures here. You want to find that middle portion between the signatures. And we're going to be gluing this in a very similar manner for like between the pages here, just using the front and back panels. And that's a really easy way to add extra papers to a journal. So to do this, you can see that one of my pages is actually a little bit shorter and smaller. So mine's going to be a little bit off here, but you know, as I've said before, it's called junk journaling and not perfect journaling. So we're going to just call it shabby and handmade and go with that. So if you don't want that to happen, just make sure that you're using pages that are sort of similar size maybe, or trim things down to fit. But I'm just gonna embrace the shabbiness, the imperfections today. And it's a really easy process to add these into your journal by just, you know, gluing down the panels to the pages in between these signatures, just like this. And now you've got some extra writing space or decorating space in your journal. You can just kind of flip through here. The other downside to this, just to keep in mind, is that you won't be able to pull out your signatures anymore because they are glued to these pieces here. So this will be kind of, if you're using the brad binding method, this is going to be your new permanent method of adding pages in if you use this. So, which it still works. Like right here, you can see that there are some wider spaces still left because I didn't add that many pages in. So you could glue even more pages in between sort of like these spaces here, like just glue more pages in the same way we just did, and you can just kind of create infinite writing spaces like with this method. So that is going to sort of finish up the pages for today's journal. So now we've got our base and we've got our signatures put in. So the next thing to do is going to be to decorate this junk journal. And I'm going to be using a bunch of projects, like I said before, from this last month that I put together. So I will put together a playlist of all of those videos. So if you missed anything, you can go find them, craft along, and then you can join me next week when we decorate this journal. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you had fun, and I will see you in next week's tutorial. Bye!